So just for simplicity's sake, I want you to imagine that there's a cup in your liver. It's sitting in your liver, and it can store a certain amount of sugar in there. But once it fills up that cup store, what's it going to do? It's going to start to overflow. And the liver has got to do something with the overflow. So what it does is it takes that excess sugar and it converts it into fat.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show.
Welcome to the Dr. Ashley Show. I'm Dr. Ashley, and today we are going to talk about how to cure fatty liver. That's right. Fatty liver is reversible. It's been termed as a chronic progressive disease, but it doesn't have to be. And really the crazy thing about fatty liver is that none of us have to have it. It's a big deal though. It's becoming much more prevalent. Right now, more than 1 billion people struggle with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And the crazy thing about this is that the incidence of fatty liver disease is increasing significantly, not only in us and the adult population in America, but in our children, because obesity just continues to climb. And right now, in obese individuals, 53% are expected to suffer from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's expected to become the #1 most common cause of pediatric chronic liver disease in the near future. Is that so wild? No one even needs to have this thing, but there are billions of people struggling with it and 53% of our obese kids. It's important because this specific fatty liver disease causes liver inflammation, which can lead to cirrhosis, which leads to scarring, and eventually puts us on the transplant list. And we've never had such a large population of children struggling with this. And how long does it actually take to lead down to this level of severity, needing to get a liver transplant? So I'm doing an entire episode on this because I do think it's so important. So alcoholic fatty liver disease used to be every diagnosis. And a decade ago, we started diagnosing things as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And there's an issue with the name there. It doesn't tell us what it actually is, but really we understand that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease comes from a metabolic dysfunction. It comes from an issue with our metabolic health. So there are quite a few people out there now, few physicians and research groups saying we should call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease metabolic associated fatty liver disease, because then that tells us what it's coming from. And if it's a metabolic issue, then we know what's going to change that: your diet. And we also know that it's much more complicated than calories in and calories out. It actually has to do with what specific foods you're eating. And we can see fatty liver disease reverse pretty darn quickly. And we see people who come into PhD weight loss who have fatty liver, and they have it pretty extreme levels, and they can reverse that. So I just want you to know, if you're struggling with this, or someone you know is struggling with this, if it's your kids or your grandkids, they don't have to have this anymore and they can reverse it. And I have a few stories I want to share with you from PhD clients. So in July 2022, client Danielle came into us, and her liver enzymes were up due to weight, and she was settling into fatty liver disease. She started PhD and she lost 20 pounds, which resulted in her levels returning to normal. And now she consumes no grains, no gluten. She found that that significantly impacted the health of her liver. She understands her carb tolerance level, and she took out Diet Coke specifically, and she thinks that completely changed her health. So it's not just the regular sugars, but it's also the sugar substitutes here that impact her. And I do have an entire episode talking about sugar substitutes. So if this interests you, make sure you go listen to it. And then we have a client, Jim, and he says in 2017, his AST and ALT liver enzymes were elevated. So my GP sent me to a local gastroenterologist, and I was diagnosed with the start of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Nothing life-threatening at the time, but she said that if I keep up what I'm doing, I could get really bad. Ironically, her general suggestion to combat it was simply to reduce carbs, increase protein, and limit portions. He says, sound familiar, right? And so over the next few years, I stubbornly pretty much ignored her suggestions and continued to do what I wanted, not what I needed to do. And as a result, I gained a lot of weight. During that time, my glucose levels went up from just over 100 to 147. And in 2022, I had my annual physical. My GP said that I'm officially diabetic. He said that he would not log that diagnosis because I was going to make some changes, and he gave me some dietary suggestions and some encouragement. I was really bummed. So the very next day, my wife and I, after hearing your radio commercials of PhD, stopped into the office and started our journey. 1 year later, my wife and I were on maintenance. She lost 50 pounds. I lost 70 pounds, and the numbers speak for themselves. In 2017, he says my AST was 55, ALT 95, and glucose was 108. In 2021, AST was 46, ALT 75, and glucose 147. So his liver enzymes had dropped. However, his glucose levels went from 108 to 147. And in 2022, after a PhD, his AST levels dropped to 20, his ALT down to 16, and his glucose down to 98. So you can see those differences significantly improved. He's no longer diabetic and no longer has a fatty liver. And he said that he went in recently for his maintenance weigh-ins. He had popped up a few pounds, and he says, I realized that I need to drop those few pounds, and I'm very motivated and excited because I know the program works. So you just want to make sure that no matter what you're doing, if you've got fatty liver, you want to find the right protocol. And today, I'm going to help you with that protocol, the 8 steps that you can implement so that you can reverse fatty liver. So fatty liver is reversible, but you've got to change your diet. Moving forward, if you hear non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, I want in your mind's eye to think metabolic associated fatty liver disease. You've got to improve your metabolic dysfunction. And when you do that, you're going to improve your fatty liver. All right. So first, I want to explain what fatty liver is and what causes it. So the liver plays a pivotal role in metabolism, detoxification, overall health. It's in charge of burning fat, but when things are off metabolically, it starts to actually store it excessively and all the signals get out of whack. So here's what happens generally when you're in a healthy physiological state. You eat carbs. They're metabolized and digested and go into the bloodstream as glucose, which is the same name as blood sugar, blood glucose. All of those things are the same thing. And I'm going to call it blood sugar, just so you can think about the carbs coming in and then being metabolized out as the sugar. So it's in sugar now in the bloodstream, and the pancreas needs to mount a response because we don't like to have a lot of sugar in the blood for long periods of time. That's when you become diabetic. So the pancreas says, hey, let's release some insulin. And what insulin does is it acts like little keys, and it travels around to your muscle cells and to your liver, and it opens up the cell so that that sugar can flow in and you can use it for energy. So that's what should happen. The liver takes up the glucose and it stores it in the liver for future use. But what happens when you eat too much of this sugar, too much of these carbohydrates for your unique body, and the liver stores are all full? So just for simplicity's sake, I want you to imagine that there's a cup in your liver. It's sitting in your liver, and it can store a certain amount of sugar in there. But once it fills up that cup store, what's it going to do? It's going to start to overflow. And the liver has got to do something with the overflow. So what it does is it takes that excess sugar and it converts it into fat. It specifically converts it into triglycerides. And if you've listened to my previous episodes talking about cholesterol and triglycerides, you understand that triglycerides are not good for your health. Triglycerides, when those are elevated, you know that you're at increased risk for cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, lots of things you do not want. So if you've got fatty liver, you're likely to have elevated triglycerides, and same goes vice versa. If you've got elevated triglycerides, you've likely got elevated fat in the liver, and fatty liver is starting to set in like it did for our clients here. So when you've got triglycerides in the liver, at some point that storage is going to overflow and the triglycerides are released into the bloodstream, and then you see elevated triglycerides on your lipid panel. And then another thing starts to happen when you develop this situation is that you develop insulin resistance. And when insulin resistance occurs, the liver produces even more glucose than it needs to because all of the signaling is off. So now your liver is producing glucose, which it doesn't need because there's already too much glucose coming into the body. So now you've got fat infiltration in the liver cells. This triggers inflammation and oxidative stress, which ultimately leads to scarring, cirrhosis, and not good news. So what I want you to understand now is how food impacts all of these aspects, this cascade of biochemistry and metabolism that we talked about. And the role of sugar is significant here. And specifically, all types of sugar and carbs play into this because they're broken down into glucose. And glucose is what overfills the liver if you're taking in too much, which then converts into fat and so on. But fructose specifically bypasses a lot of the metabolism and digestion process that regular table sugar and other sugars go through. And fructose goes straight to the liver, specifically high fructose corn syrup and regular fructose. They go straight to the liver and convert directly into fatty acids. So that means that liquid sugar and items that have high fructose corn syrup in it, specifically processed foods, sugary beverages, exacerbate the situation significantly. So what we want to have happen is we want the liver to be able to burn stored fat. We want to decrease the burden on the liver to process excess sugar. Therefore, I just talked about the role of sugar. It makes sense that we've got to decrease our carbohydrate intake so that it's underneath our unique tolerance level of it. Hey guys, quick interruption to the show to remind you about GLUCOCUT+, my latest supplement designed specifically for weight loss and maintenance. You know, weight loss can stress your body, it affects your thyroid, muscle mass, and metabolism. GLUCOCUT+ is packed with patented ingredients to regulate your blood sugar for longer lasting energy, enhance fat burning, and support lean muscle and your thyroid health. We only use top quality ingredients and it's super effective. It's like this all-in-one for metabolic support. Visit dr.ashleywellness.com, use code ASHLEY10 for 10% off your first purchase, or receive 20% off your first subscription order with free shipping. Plus, enjoy a 30-day money-back guarantee. Now, back to the show. So let's talk about the 8 steps that you can implement into your life, and they're pretty simple, so that you can reverse this fatty liver. Number 1 is no liquid sugar. And you understand from what I just mentioned about the role of sugar and fructose and high fructose corn syrup, how it impacts the liver in a negative way, especially if you're carrying excess fat. And if you carry this excess fat specifically in the belly, you better bet that it's starting to fill up the liver. And so this would be the liquid sugar, fruit juice, applesauce, popsicles. I'll often go with my kids different places and the folks will be like, hey, we've got some treats, we've got some popsicles, but don't worry, they're fruit juice sweetened. It does not matter that they're fruit juice sweetened. The body's not like, hooray, fruit juice and hooray, not fruit juice sugar. Like, it doesn't really matter. Now, we could compare, for example, a strawberry to a gummy bear. We know that the strawberry is a better option for sure, right? It's natural, it has fiber with it, it's got vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, but the sugar component of the strawberry and the basic sugar component of the gummy bear is very similar. So if the popsicle is sweetened with fruit juice, it's going to impact the liver in the same way that a few gummy bears would impact the liver. I hope that that makes sense to you. Processed sugars are additional culprits when it comes to things that have a lot of sugar in them. So what I mean by this is cereals. It doesn't matter if it's a Raisin brand or a Kashi brand or an organic brand. Again, the body doesn't care if the sugar comes from maple syrup, if it comes from brown rice syrup, or if it comes from cane sugar. Flavor sweetened yogurts have a lot of sugar in them. A Larabar is a good example where it's pretty darn clean. There's only a few items in the Larabar, but all of this sugar coming from dates still negatively impacts your fatty liver. Green juices are another thing that has a ton of sugar in them, usually because they're filled with a ton of fruit. It doesn't matter if this fruit comes in conjunction with a few kale or spinach leaves, it still impacts the body in a similar way that the fruit juice, the applesauce, the fruit sweetened popsicles may. Okay, the second step that you're going to look for are grains. Just like I talked to you about Danielle, and she removed the grains from her diet because those grains are metabolically broken down in a similar fashion to the sugar. And so if your body's very sensitive to sugar and to carbohydrates, I want you to lump these together. So this would be wheat, corn, oats, again, broken down as sugar. People will say, well, what about Ezekiel bread? Like, I really love Ezekiel bread. And I will say, maybe it's less bad than white bread. It might take a little bit longer period of time to be broken down because there's more fiber in it. If you are dealing with a lot of excess fat weight, specifically in the belly, I would suggest that you let that go at least for a period of time until you get that under control. Number 3 is letting go of vegetable oils. Vegetable oils are inflammatory. And what I mean by that is sunflower seed oil, cottonseed oil, canola oil, peanut oil, all of these oils that are cheap, that are processed very quickly, that companies put in all of these processed types foods that you find in bags and boxes, chips, crackers, cookies, popcorn. If you look at most popcorn, it is cooked in a vegetable oil. That's just an example. Potato chips. These days, though, if you really want those items and you look at the label, you can find some companies that fry these types of chips and popcorn in more avocado oil and coconut oil. That's going to be a better bet because they don't have these high omega-6 vegetable oils in them. So instead, what you want to do is stick with the olive oil, avocado oil, even a little bit of bacon grease. If you cook bacon and you have a little bit left over and you want to make your eggs in that, that is totally fine to do because this bacon grease is actually very stable at high heat cooking. So it's a good type of fat that you can consume in moderation. So number 4 is to fill up on protein, meats, fish, chicken, turkey, add some green leafy vegetables like spinach, kale, collard greens, lettuce if you like that, asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, focusing on fermented foods like sauerkraut, maybe some kefir in there, Bubby's pickles that are fermented to give you that good healthy gut microbiome. If you want to incorporate fruits, you want to focus on berries because they have more fiber, more antioxidants, less sugar, and then maybe some fermented dairy like I mentioned earlier with the kefir. You want to give your liver a break. So I always talk that there are 4 macronutrients found in food. There's carbs, protein, fats, and meal timing. We don't talk about meal timing enough. When you eat is just as important as what you eat. And so the liver, we talked about all the important things that the liver does, but when it's in a fed state, it's really busy on storing fat. You've got to give it a period of time where it's not in a fed state. It's more in a fasted state where it can actually burn the fat, where it can actually work to detox. I was recently talking with my husband and I was like, you know what? I think it'd be a good time to do a little detox. I'm just feeling it. What could we do? Maybe we could take some different supplements or do a specific shake. And he looks at me, he's like, the best things to do to detox the body are to fast, drink water and fast. I'm like, oh, that's just so boring. It's not very sexy to think about fasting, but really fasting is all you need to do to detox the body. So you should consider that. And what I mean by fasting, you could do 24, you could do a 48-hour fast, but you don't even need to do that. Give yourself a 16-8 window throughout the week, a few days a week where you don't eat. And I talk about intermittent fasting in one of my previous episodes. So if you want to dive into the nitty-gritty, go find that episode and then ask me any kind of questions that you got. But in general, give yourself an eating window of 8 hours and then a fasting window of 16 to 8 if you're looking to reverse your fatty liver or just detox the body a little bit. So what this would look like is you would stop eating, say, around 7 o'clock at night, and then you don't eat anything. Now, you can drink water or tea, you can drink black coffee. That's totally fine to do. And then you don't eat again until, noon, 11 to 1-ish in the afternoon. And that's when you start entering into a very sophisticated and moderate meal plan where you're not just eating whatever you want during that eating window, but you're still eating within your balanced meal plan. So number 6 is on a similar front, no snacking, no grazing. We really want to get that body into that sweet state of fat burn where the liver can focus on detoxifying and burning all that excess fat and all that excess sugar that's in there. We want to teach the body how to burn fat, and that meal timing and that little bit of fasting is helpful. Number 7 is focusing on omegas. You want to make sure that you're getting those omega-3s in your diet. We get way too many omega-6s in our diet, and we get those from those vegetable oils I mentioned earlier. So instead, focus on omega-3s through fish, sardines, mackerels. You could even take cod liver oil, which I know doesn't taste great, but you can get it in capsules. That's going to help you also with vitamin A and vitamin D. When you take your cod liver oil, I recommend you take it with vitamin E because vitamin E helps you absorb all the great things that are in that cod liver oil supplement. And then number 8 is lifestyle, thinking about sleep, stress, regulating your hormones, reducing inflammation, and then focusing on the type of exercise that you're doing. Chronic cardio, running long distances, biking long distances, getting on the elliptical machine for long periods of time, just trying to burn calories, doesn't positively impact the body and doesn't help you with reversing fatty liver. So if you're looking to do that, the types of exercise you want to focus on is walking every day briskly, at least a 30-minute brisk walk, ideally outside so that you can see the sun and get time in nature, which is really important for reducing stress and improving sleep. And then lifting something heavy, not enough to injure yourself. It could be body weight, whatever you want it to be, but lift something heavy to overload your muscles. And then some kind of high intensity interval training. And this is different for each person. Don't get overwhelmed by it. Don't get daunted by it. But an example might be getting on a stationary bike, warming up for 5 minutes, and then just pushing hard, whatever hard means for you. But if you were doing it with your neighbor next to you, you wouldn't be able to talk to them comfortably or talk to them at all, really. Like you really do want to push, and you could push from 10 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that, and then pull back and go easy for about a minute, get your breath back, recover completely, and then push again for 10, 30 seconds, and then pull back, recover for a minute. And you could do 6 to 12 of those repetitions and then cool down. And the whole thing maximum would take you about 25 minutes. Those are 2 types of activity that really can help to reverse the fatty liver and in general let go of the excess fat weight, especially the stubborn belly fat. So there is your cure for fatty liver for you, for your kids, for your grandkids, whoever might be struggling with that. I hope that you got a lot of great value from this episode. If you are listening to this on a podcast platform, please follow, please leave a review. It means a lot to me. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment below. If you struggle with fatty liver, let me know about it. If you've found a way to reverse your fatty liver, share with me here in the community. If you have any questions on the 8 steps to cure it, drop a comment below and I will help you and I will respond. So remember, you've got to step up to make the change. Lead with your heart, train your mind, and do not negotiate with your body. See you next time.